Good day, my name is Ruvimbo Gwatirisa. I'm from Inyathelo, the South African Institute for Advancement. Today we'll be looking at governance as a topic for discussion, and our guest speakers today will be Janine Ogle and Gaby Ritchie. Janine, why are we talking about governance? Given the funding issues and changes in the nonprofit funding environment, why are we talking about governance? Why do you think it's important?
Well, governance is one of the key elements to the financial sustainability of any organization. So it's not just about writing the funding proposal and sending it off. You need to have a properly put together, established governing structure for an organization that ensures that the organization remains true to its purpose, does the work that it's supposed to do, is accountable and is transparent, and that it is run effectively, and the governing body is there to provide oversight of an organization to ensure that this happens. For people who want to give money, donate, fund an organization, they need to know that it's properly governed, that it has the appropriate structures to manage whatever funding is coming in. If an organization has good governance, then it positions itself to attract funding from donors. It also speaks to an organization's reputation in the work that it does. So an improvement of governance for an organization actually makes that organization more attractive to donors.
What does the code contain, and what does it mean to be a signatory?
So the Independent Code is a code of governance developed specifically for nonprofit organizations in South Africa. It represents the core and fundamental values and principles of governance for nonprofits that all nonprofits in South Africa can apply, regardless of what their size is or how they're established or incorporated. And because we focused on just what's core and fundamental and common to all organizations in South Africa, it only has 19 values and principles. So it really is the very basic and minimum a basic level of compliance. It has 8 basic values that speak to things like an organization's fidelity to purpose, the altruistic nature of NPOs, integrity and independence. And then we have 6 principles that are leadership principles that would focus on aspects of accountability, transparency, and things like risk management and sustainability. And it also has 5 legal and fiscal areas or principles that an organization should consider. And this really talks to how an organization is established and incorporated, and also the responsibilities that we have depending on where and how we registered, whether you're registered as an NPO or PBO as a trust. There are responsibilities that go with it that we need to be aware of. There really is, in many areas, not a very clear understanding of what this governance is. And I think for NPOs, the word governance is not, our everyday language. So I sometimes get phone calls from people saying, I want to know about corporate governance for NPOs. We don't do corporate governance. But the term, generally, that people read in the newspapers, that people speak about, is corporate governance. And whenever people hear about governance, they automatically associate it with corporates. And yet we as NPOs are also involved in governance, and very often daily without realizing it. So maybe to go into the Independent Code, so I'm sure I see some familiar faces, so some of you are probably already aware of the code. So it's a code of governance that's been developed specifically for the nonprofit sector in South Africa. And I say specifically for the nonprofit sector in South Africa is because we took into account the laws of South Africa in developing the code. So it represents the core and fundamental values and principles of governance that all NPOs can apply. In developing the code, the working group of which Inyathelo is a part of had many conversations over 2 years every time we met about how do we ensure that this code that we want to develop applies to all nonprofits in South Africa. We've got the tiniest CBO, which may be a creche in a township, maybe somewhere in Cape Town. We've got NGOs like Inyathelo in the middle of Cape Town. And then you have your international NGOs, and you even have your national NGOs with provincial offices in every province. How do you come up with a single code that applies to all these NPOs? And the decision was that we have to focus on what is core and fundamental and basic in terms of governance values and principles that all NGOs can apply regardless of the size of the organization or how you incorporate it. The actual independent code only has 19 values and principles. 8 are basic values that speak to an organization's fidelity to purpose, the altruistic nature of NPOs, integrity, independence, etc. So the lady already asked a question about strategy. If you're a governing body of an NGO and one of your responsibilities is fidelity to purpose, you have to be involved in strategy, because how else do you ensure that your organization does not stray from its original purpose? It also has 6 principles which are focused on leadership and leadership related responsibilities. So we speak here about things like accountability, transparency, fundraising, sustainability, and risk management, which are just some of the leadership principles. And then it has 5 principles that focus on legal and fiscal areas that an organization has to consider. So this is how an organization is established or incorporated, the responsibilities of NPO and PBO registration, etc.
I think what we tend to do, and this may be a South African phenomenon, I'm not sure, is we look for the big names. So we want the name on the board because that seems to be the quickest, fastest way to get profile and to get doors open. What often happens though is those board members either aren't actually able to come to a meeting, or they're on perhaps 4 or 5 or 10 other boards, so they're happy to play a name role. But in terms of actually getting down to the nuts and bolts of being a board member on a functioning board, the help or the support of the board members can start to get a little bit thin on the ground. So the first question really is who do we need on our board, and whether you are starting an organization or you the new CEO, or a whole lot of board members have for various reasons resigned, and that can happen for reasons of just actually too busy. I've been on the board for 5 years. I'm finding that I'm not able to make the kind of contribution I would like to. In effect, that's an empty seat, and I would rather make it available for someone who can come in and contribute. There may be tension between the board and the CEO, or the board and the organization. In the beginning, you would be looking for really committed board members. In effect, those are usually the people who are implementing, who are doing the work, who are there, who are doing the all-nighters, the writing fundraising proposals, doing the budgets, trying to really get an initiative on the road and going. Further down the line, you would be looking at a completely different kind of skill set. You would be looking for, ideally, as your first question, who really supports our mission, who loves what we do, who do we want to bring on board, who's going to speak of our organization and of our work as if it's almost their first priority, it's their first passion, it's their first love. You would be looking for people with financial skills, because one of the key areas of board oversight is obviously around finance and financial management. You would be looking for board members who have good administrative skills and understand what it takes to keep an organization together, and to not just to deliver on the perhaps contracted deliverables for donors, but to understand what it takes to keep that organization linked into itself and growing and moving forward. You would need board members who have a really good understanding of the external context, of the environment in which your organization is operating, so that when strategic decisions need to be made by the board, they're made with reference to what's going on elsewhere. One of the things that can become really complicated, though, and it's just something I want to highlight here, is the relationship between the CEO and the board. Some really quite horrible tensions can arise when there is lack of clarity about the role of the CEO and the role of the board. The board is very definitely not supposed to be operational. So it's the kind of nuts and bolts of running the day-to-day of the organization. The message to board members is hands off. The key issues for the board, any board members sitting in the room, the key issues for the board to focus on are around oversight, So that would be legislative compliance, financial management, and accountability, obviously, to donors and in terms of the law. And did I say strategy? Strategy. That's really the level at which the board operates. What has happened, and we've seen it a number of times, I wouldn't say increasingly or decreasingly, but it regularly comes up, is organizations coming to an absolute standstill because of the relationship between the board and the CEO. Where the board isn't happy with something that the CEO is doing, the board perhaps starts meddling in what's going on in the organization and how day-to-day things are being run. Or what happens is the board is desperately trying to give strategic direction, but the CEO has got a whole other agenda. So it can really kind of come unstuck. And in fact, we have recently stopped working with an organization because they in fact closed.
What things have been mentioned in the policy framework, this new draft policy framework, that you think are a problem in terms of what government wants to stipulate or control or whatever? What key things do you think are issues, and why do you think that those are issues?
So there are three very clear proposals at the end. So the one is that they want, the NPO directorate as it stands wants to be called Sanpora, and unfortunately I can't remember what Sanpora stands for. It's an acronym. So the NPO directorate will then be called Sanpora, and they want it moved out of DSD.
South African NPO Regulating Authority.
Say it louder.
Sanpora stands for the South African NPO Regulating Authority.
Right. So Sanpora would be moved out of DSD. They say there are some constraints to it being an office of the DSD in terms of their growth and their budget. And they want to be an independent entity outside of DSD, but still reporting and responsible to the DSD minister. So that's the first clear proposal. The second proposal is that they want there to be a tribunal, an independent tribunal established within Sanpora, and the tribunal's responsibilities will be as the, what would it be? What's the word? If there are any issues or between the NPO directorate and NPOs, any conflict, then the tribunal would step in to mediate those.
And they would have some kind of legal authority.
Yes,
they would be the final word.
If you do use the tribunal, then whatever the outcome is of that process would be the final outcome. You wouldn't be able to take it to a court of law post that. And then also the establishment of an advisory committee that would advise the minister, but also an independent people appointed to that committee.
Okay. As a board member, can I be held accountable for anything that goes wrong within the organization? What are my responsibilities when it finally comes out that some bad things have happened within the organization and I did not perform my oversight responsibilities, like to the best of my ability? What are the accounts? Will I be held accountable? Will I go to jail as well with management?
Board members do carry personal responsibility. The extent of the personal responsibility depends on the kind of entity of which, the kind of legal entity of which you are a committee member or a trustee. But the board trustees in legal terms are responsible and accountable for the direction and delivery on the mission of the organization, and particularly for the I suppose transparent and appropriate use of the funding, which is either kind of donor funding. The board in effect holds an organization's funding in trust for the organization's beneficiaries. So certainly for I'm not sure about the voluntary association, I'm afraid. I don't know to what extent executive committee members are personally liable. But certainly for the other entities, there's a personal liability, which is very important. I mean, you raised the issue of people fairly casually accepting a board role without really understanding what that means in terms of, right, okay, what am I actually committing to? What that then raises are issues around the attractiveness of an organisation to good, effective board members who are committed. Because if your organisation looks like it's going down the pipes, or your financial management just looks all over the place, or there doesn't seem to be any, or whatever, the effective on the ball potential trustees or committee members are going to be looking and saying, I'm not getting on board here. I'm not taking responsibility for the mess that a whole lot of other people have left behind, for example. So, I mean, really, the idea is that you would do everything in your power to prevent your board structure or your board practice from getting to that stage in the first place. It becomes incredibly difficult to rescue a board that isn't doing what it's supposed to be doing, because the just relationships on the board, the dynamics start getting can really get ugly, and organizations close as a result. Some of the issues that we have been talking about now speak very directly to the board almost being the front line for a donor inquiry, a donor review of an organization. Donors will ask, what's the governance like? Where the audited financials? Do you have an annual report? Can we see some information? How often does your board meet? Who's on your board? Certainly in all the proposals we submit, they always want to know who's on the board, how many changes have there been, how often do board members change, what are the responsibilities, who are these people, where do they come from, like what's their experience. They really want to know that the organisation they're about to invest in is in good hands, and the board is one of the first signs of things being in good health. I'm sure
it also speaks to the board's responsibility beyond just attending 2 or 3 meetings a year. It's way beyond that.
Yeah.
It's in your everyday interactions, because you are responsible for the financial sustainability of an organization.
Yeah.
And in your interactions with people outside, in your everyday life, if you come across, we're not saying that you have to write the proposal, but if you come across a potential donor, do you speak about the organization to that potential donor? Do you introduce the organization? And then go back to the director and send them an email and say, by the way, I met this person. They're very interested in the work that you do. Could you follow up? Which is beyond just attending the 2 or 3 meetings a year.
Yeah. The very important point. I know in the US, for example, I don't think it's a big practice here at all. It's expected that board members themselves would give to the organization, so that they can stand on a platform of, I believe in this organization so much that I'm prepared to commit my own financial resources. And from that position, I'm asking you to join us. Come on board, get involved, give your money, ideally. So there are a number of ways in which the board is involved. Certainly the board is expected in kind of good practice to open funding doors. You would want to have people perhaps who are involved in the corporate sector who could introduce, who could take you to the CSI department of the company they work for, or of other companies who perhaps operate in high net worth circles. You want people who are committed and engaged, and that very commitment and their capacity to give voice to the organization is what, at a bottom line, assists.
How does an NGO ensure in the current climate today that it complies, with the regulations, that it remains focused on the core principles of a non-profit organization instead of running purely like a business?
There are all sorts of legal considerations about how much of your income you can generate that is pure income generation. It makes a difference whether it's related to your core mission or not. So, for example, Inyathelo does training, so if we charge fees for training, that's core business, that's not in addition to. So what gets taxed and what doesn't get taxed is all linked into that. We often hear, it's what you need to do is you need to set up a for-profit, and then the for-profit can fund the non-profit. Now, anyone who's set up a for-profit or set up a non-profit, or in some lunatic moment try to do both, will know that, I mean, it's on, you know, entrepreneurs, there are all sorts of stats about how many survive the first 5 years. It's a 24/7 operation. It takes all your guts and commitment. It takes every ounce of thought, of consideration, of planning, of constant attention. So how you would be able to set up a non-profit, make that work, set up a for-profit, make that work, with it just, people trot it out as a obvious solution. I completely can't see it. Certainly as a non-profit, we advocate and practice a kind of mixed model where we have some donor income, we generate some income, we do some cost recovery, we offer consultancy for fees to sometimes to corporate, sometimes to foundations, to other non-profits. We have various ways of attracting our income, but the for-profit sell things to support your work my sense is it's a little bit of a myth, because people trot it out as an easy financial solution, and it absolutely isn't. I think it's probably the least effective way to go, apart from being really difficult. There are many ways of an organization engaging with its board that would contribute to that board remaining effective. Having an effective board takes hard work. It's not something that happens automatically. There are key features of an effective board, and there are key features of an organization that has an effective board. So again, how a board operates and how an organization operates are very integrally linked. Once your board is effective, which is obviously sort of first prize, it's an ideal position, the kinds of mechanisms perhaps that you would use to keep that board effective, I'd like to sort of bullet point them in a way. The first one is that board meet regularly. Secondly, that the board as a whole and the individual members are all really clear and have a good understanding of what their role as board members is. Each board member should bring a particular set of skills, either professional skills like accounting or law. They would have access perhaps to high net worth individuals, or they would be very schooled in what's going on in the external environment. So with that kind of effectiveness, with board members understanding their role, they have particular skills or insights that they bring to the board, and with regular meetings, a board has a much greater chance of remaining effective and engaged in an organization's mission.
How does a strong governance structure change the support a non-profit organization receives?
A governance structure is, in many senses, the absolute foundation of an organization. So with a strong foundation in place, an organization is much more able not only to deliver on its mandate, to deliver in line with the funding that it's received, but also in a way it's able to attract the sort of support that it needs. What happens with a weak governance structure is that the organization as a whole would end up not having the kind of guidance in terms of strategy or the kind of financial oversight particularly that it needs to be able to present itself as a strong, fundable organization to donors. So the link between good governance and adequate funding or resourcing for an organization is a very strong link. The link between strong governance and a strong organization, it's kind of one and the same thing.
What do you do when you can't find the right people for your board or for your organization?
Certainly in South Africa, finding board members is a challenge. At Inyathelo, we regularly hear of organizations that are struggling to find the right kind of board members, or are struggling to almost draw up a profile of the kinds of board members they're looking for. Most people who are on boards certainly all non-profit board members are voluntary. So you, as a non-profit, you're relying on people's willingness to be available out of hours. What that sometimes means is that board members are often retired and aren't engaged in full-time employ. That can add a very particular sort of demographic slant to a board where board members are often older. One of the key things that we need to keep in mind as South African nonprofits is the need to bring younger people, perhaps a bit more energy, a little bit more dynamism into a nonprofit board environment. But finding those board members is a challenge, and mostly it's due to people being really busy and being willing to find the time to commit to an organization.